Well, hello, I'm Jenny, and I recently completed a 238 miles hike through the Scottish Highlands, the trails being the Great Glenway and the John O'Groats Trail. And I wanted to talk about some of the gear items I took with me. Rather than make another huge gear video with everything, I figured I would just talk about the pieces of gear that were the highlights for me and the pieces of gear that I probably wouldn't bring again, or I would bring something different. So first I wanted to talk about my top 3 sort of winners for the gear that I brought on my trip. Probably the one I talked about the most on my trip was my new sleeping pad. So this is the Exped Ultra 3R. I have the wide pad version of this. So it's really great for side sleepers. It has the vertical baffles as opposed to the horizontal baffles. If you sleep on your side, it makes it more comfortable that way. Also, the thickness of the pad makes it so that your hip or your shoulders aren't digging into the ground, which I really loved about it. I'm somebody that tends to sleep on my side and sleep crunched up, and due to the width of this pad, I felt like I always had enough room to curl my knees up. So this pad was a huge winner for me. As a hammock camper, it kind of softened the blow a little bit of having to sleep in a tent. This is actually a pump sack that it comes with. It's called the Schnozzle. It's got this really long schnoz, and it plugs directly into the pad. How it works, you just fill this up with air. I just kind of shook it, and then you kind of like roll it up, and it squeezes the air into the pad. And I was like, this is the first time I've really used a pump sack pretty regularly on a hike, and I was impressed. It surpassed my expectation. It probably filled this pad. Usually 6 to 7 bagfuls of air would fill this pad. So I didn't feel like it was laborious or anything filling the pad up with this. So I'm probably, honestly, I'll never take a air pump again. The second winner of the trip is my new tent, which I got because it's pretty much the lightest one-person tent on the market. It's the Durston X-Mid Pro 1. It weighs less than a pound, and for how lightweight it is incredibly spacious, both in terms of height. So I always felt like I had enough room when I was sitting up in the tent, and also the vestibule space. It has 2 vestibules, and they're big vestibules, so you could easily fit, you know, your backpack, your shoes, any like little extra pieces of gear that you might have. It was great. I have a couple small complaints about the tent, but they're pretty minor considering all the bonuses of it. The only thing I did not bring the stuff sack because I can never fit it in. I don't know what the trick is. I can't get it in there. So I usually would just fold and roll it up, and then I would just stuff it in the front pocket of my backpack, and that worked out just fine. I will say a tent like this, where it's a single wall tent, it does get a lot of condensation. So what I did was, I always bring this when I bring tents anyway. This is just a piece of ShamWow, and it's very absorbent, and then when it gets saturated with water, you just squeeze the water out and you keep wiping. So this helped, you know, get some of that water off. The tent stakes I bought for it, I was trying something different this hike because I normally hike with shepherd hook stakes, and they do pull out of the ground very easily, and I knew I'd be hiking in windy areas. So I actually got some Y stakes, and they held into the ground incredibly. I never had any issue with these pulling out. I will say they're harder to get into the ground, but usually you could find a rock or something that you could use to hammer it in. Was very happy with these, and then they pull out easily because you got a loop on the end of it. These are from Wise Owl Outfitters. I'm going to link all of this stuff in the description, so if you want to look at it yourself, feel free. I also am going to put a link to my full gear list, so if you want to know everything that I brought on the trip, you can click on my lighter pack list, and it will tell you what it is, where where I got it, if applicable, and the cost I paid for it and the weight. So all of that will be linked in the description if you're interested. My third winner of the trip was my Injinji toe socks. I've been using Injinji toe socks for years. Ever since I got my first blister several years ago, I was looking for a solution so that my feet wouldn't rub so much on my shoes. Ever since I started wearing Injinji socks, I have not gotten a single blister, which is incredible. So how this works, it obviously has the toes that are all separated, so your toes aren't rubbing against each other when you have this. You put your feet in the Injinji, and then you're gonna put probably a merino wool sock over it. These are from Darn Tough. I just have the ankle length version of the Darn Tough. So if you put this over the Injinji, not only are your toes protected from rubbing against each other, but now your feet aren't rubbing on your shoes. What's happening is that the sock layers are rubbing against each other rather than your foot rubbing against the shoe. Okay, so now I want to talk about the losers of the trip, or the pieces of gear that didn't quite work out, I didn't use, or failed me in some way. So the first piece of gear I'll talk about is my bug net pants. I actually didn't wear these at all. I brought these as a trial because I thought midges were going to be really bad. They do have very narrow holes in them, so they would protect against midges. These are just a cheap brand I got off of Amazon. I like them. It's just that on this trip they weren't necessary. Would I bring them on future trips? Maybe, it depends, but where on this trip there was maybe one night where midges were bad and the rest of the time they weren't, so I really didn't wear these at all. They are great if you're going to be doing a lot of hanging out at camp, not in your tent. And I actually wanted to leave them in my suitcase when I got to Inverness because I didn't use them at all on the Great Glenway, and I didn't think I was going to need them on the John O'Groats Trail, and I didn't. But because my suitcase was missing at the time, I was not able to do that. So I was stuck carrying these the whole trip. So I was just like, ugh. The next piece of gear I want to talk about, which disappointed me, was my Sealskins waterproof socks. In the past, I've said, waterproof socks really aren't waterproof. They're more like water resistant. I've talked to people who have had great luck with waterproof socks. I just am not one of them. I've tried several different brands at this point. They all leak through. These were no exception. I will say, yes, it takes away from some of the water sloshy sensation that you might otherwise get, but honestly, there was one day where it just rained so much and you're just walking through puddles anyway, like they soak through immediately. And I was just like, yeah, what's the point of carrying the extra weight if they're just not gonna really do much of anything at all? So I don't think I would bring these again. If I knew of waterproof socks out there that were actually waterproof, I would love to hear it. I just haven't found any. So if you know of any, let me know. The third piece of gear, which, this was such a disappointment for me because I was so hopeful for these. These are the Z-Packs Virtus rain pants. And I'd heard so many good things about these. They're super lightweight. You can tell right off the bat, they're very waterproof, but what happened was, as I was hiking in them on a day when it was especially rainy, and inside the pants, the seams are lined with this seam sealing tape, and it started to come off the seam, and you can tell it is very cheap plastic that they put on it. So now that I see what it is, it doesn't surprise me that this came off. But I'm just bummed because these are so expensive, and I know they probably did this to save weight, but I'd rather have something a little bit more robust if I'm spending that much money, even if it does weigh a little bit more. So that about covers it for my winners and my losers of my through hike through Scotland. If you have any questions about any of the gear I used, let me know in the comments. Be sure to check out the links I have in the description, my gear list, the links for these. And if you have any questions about specific gear considerations that you would want to make for hiking in the UK, I have another video for that, which I will link in the description as well. Thank you for watching and happy trails.